John Dewey was an American philosopher, educational reformer, and psychologist. His ideas have been influential in education and social reform. He was one of the primary figures that was associated with philosophy of pragmatism. He is also considered to be one of the founders of functional psychology. He was a major voice of progressive education and liberalism. He was a well-known public intellectual. He is well known for his publications concerning education. John Dewey is such a smart man. His biography was incredible. He has visited many countries, and he is a firm believer of education and his philosophies. Some background on John Dewey was that he was born in Burlington, Vermont, to a modest family. Dewey was married to Alice Chipman in 1886, and they had 7 children together. Alice Chipman died in 1927. He then remarried a widow, Roberta Grant. Dewey attended the University of Vermont. He graduated in 1879. Dewey was a high school teacher in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Unsure of his career to pursue, Dewey hoped to teach high school after an unsuccessful summer job hunting. His cousin, principal of the Seminary Institute in Pennsylvania, got him a teaching job, which he held for 2 years. Dewey continued to read philosophy in his spare time. When his cousin resigned, however, Dewey lost his job. He returned to Vermont to become the only teacher in private school in Charlotte. He began to spend time with Torrey again, and to discuss Dewey's readings in ancient and modern philosophies. He also was an elementary teacher in a small town called Charlotte, Vermont. He then decided that his place was not with secondary education. Dewey went back to school and received his Ph.D. from the School of Arts and Science at Johns Hopkins University. He then became a faculty posting at the University of Michigan. He was a very successful man who loved to teach and be in the education system. He was very caring and was a very smart man. He loved to be around people and spread his knowledge. After World War I, he traveled the world lecturing in Japan at the Imperial Institute and spending 2 years teaching at universities in China. In 1924, he went to study schools in Turkey, and 2 years later he visited the University of Mexico. His praise for the Russian education system was inspected on a 1928 trip to the Soviet Union earned him much criticism. Dewey was a shy and quiet man, and as a teacher, he sometimes put his students to sleep. Those who managed to stay awake, however, could watch a man fascinated with ideas actually creating ideas in the classroom. Even though Dewey might have been boring, many people were probably mad they fell asleep during his lectures because he is one of the smartest men and they could learn so much from his ideas. Dewey is a very successful man and he loved to help people and serve them. He traveled all over the world so he could help people understand education better. This is such an incredible thing for someone to do. He was truly a selfless man to take time out of his life to travel to different parts of the world to share his knowledge with others and help them be better people and better educators. Dewey then retired from teaching but still wrote and published books. He did this because he was a firm believer in education. Even though he didn't teach anymore, he still wanted to have some way of teaching people. In 1930, Dewey retired from teaching, but he continued to publish works clarifying his ideas. Although many are difficult to read, he published over 300 books and articles. In public affairs, he was one of the first to warn of the dangers of Adolf Hitler, his rise in power in Germany, and the Japanese threat in the Far East. He wrote many inspiring articles and books that help people learn about the world, especially the dangers of Adolf Hitler and the threat in the Far East. He was so smart to know that those things were going to happen, and they did happen. Many people are inspired by his writings still today. If I were asked to name the most needed of all reforms in the spirit of education, I should say cease conceiving of education as mere preparation for later life, and make of it the full meaning of the present life. You need to live in the present life, not in the later life. John Dewey was a guy who always lived his life in the present life and took things as they came. Dewey had a philosophy that claimed that men behaved out of habit and that change often led to unexpected outcomes. Men were forced to think creatively when things would change. For Dewey, thought was the means through which men came to understand and connect with the world around him. A universe education was key to teaching people how to abandon their habits and think creatively. People can't think creatively when they are surrounded by average people. They have to get out of the box and get around things that will influence creativity, which would be education. John Dewey is such an important person in our education system today. He has shaped teachers, the way they teach, and how people learn things. He is truly a smart man that has done so much in our education. He went to school for a long time so he could learn more and more about the education system. He went to foreign places to teach people. This makes him a very selfless person. And he also was a strong believer that people needed to get an education, and he also had a philosophy that people realized and they needed to be different. John Dewey was a smart man that changed the way people looked at education today. He will forever be in our education system. He will be remembered for what he did to better our lives and how the future teachers can better the lives of their students.